G'day, Joash Barnes here. I'm the host of the Step Into Potential podcast, where I aim to interview people about how to step into potential. Today, my first guest is Dan Collins. He's an educational leader, he's a property investor, and he loves personality traits. So, welcome to episode 1 with Dan Collins. How you going, mate?
Doing well, feeling good, and happy to be here.
Look, it's been a whirlwind journey. You know, you and I go back quite a long way, so this makes it very interesting for me to talk to you and especially to get you as a person out there. We moved to Sweden last year, Emily and I, as a result of you and Alex moving out before us, and you sort of paved this pathway to go, and I've witnessed your journey since moving countries, and then you've recently moved back to Australia, out to a place called Chinchilla in the Sticks, from the coldest place in the world to possibly one of the hottest when it gets through summer. So, look, talk about your experience over the last few years. How was it? Where did you go and where have you been?
Well, if I can come into my journey in minutes, obviously everyone's journey is a long story, which you can go back right to the day they were born, effectively. But I was working at a school, and this school had been, as a science teacher, it had been the school that I had always wanted to work at. So I worked there for about 5.5 years, and in that time I got married, met my wife, and I think I was sitting, could have been even the swimming carnival one year, watching the kids do their races, sort of supervising this area, and it was the same area I'd supervised the year before, which was the same area as the year before that, and before that, and before that. And I realized I wasn't really growing. I wasn't really challenging myself. Like, life was very, very comfortable. And I knew that, well, this is talking about potential. I knew there was more potential, but I had to do something different. And my wife as well, she had always admired how I'd gone and taught overseas. I'd done a stint in the UK, living in London, teaching in London, traveling the world. And that would be back in 2014. So we made the decision to move somewhere different to Australia. So we were tossing up a lot of cold countries, obviously Australia being quite warm. I didn't realize how warm Australia was until I moved to Sweden. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about getting that different context, completely different experiences. And I mean, London previously also lived in America. They're pretty similar to Australia in a lot of ways. I mean, with their Anglo-Saxon sort of Anglified versions of the world where we all speak English and we have that common culture. Sweden, it's comfortable enough, but it's also very different. And I learned a lot through that experience. And particularly, I grew personally and in my career at that place. So back in Australia now, I'm leading a secondary school over here, 260 students and about 16 to 20 staff members, working as a head of secondary, effectively an assistant principal. And at 32 years old, it's quite a challenge. It's a big step up, and I'm working very hard. Working probably, I say 100-hour weeks. It's probably closer to 90-hour weeks. So I'm basically working all the time. I mean, when I get up to when I go to bed, because there's a lot to learn in this new role. I'm hoping it'll slow down soon, because it's sustainable for a few months. It's not sustainable long term though. But in terms of potential, in terms of growth, I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, awesome. So when you talk about the fact that you were sort of stagnant, I mean, we've had a lot of discussions about that in the past, how we should always pursue continual growth. When you set out to move to Sweden with Alex, what was it like? Talk me through your planning processes. How did you come to the conclusion that, hey, I need to do something different? Like, I mean, you experienced that there was a mundane, life of the same swimming pool every same year, all that sort of thing. But how did you go from living in Brisbane, Australia, to Sweden, and how did you also talk Alex into going there? Alex being your wife, obviously we didn't mention that earlier, but what was that process like? How did you identify why you needed to grow, and then how did you go through that growth journey in Sweden?
Yeah, I think I never had to convince Alex to go. I think we were both in the same position, wanting to grow. And I don't think everyone would conceptualize it like that. And perhaps even at the time, I didn't conceptualize it as I'm needing to grow, I'm stagnant. Although, as soon as I moved over, that's how I would explain. Because a lot of people would ask, why are you here in Sweden? Because a lot of people who moved to Sweden, at least in the town we were from, were were coming from countries which weren't as good as Sweden. You know, they were sort of trying to work their way up in sort of the socio-economic ladder of the world. And Australia being a very affluent country, although we don't always realise just how affluent Australia is, they were surprised. I mean, it makes sense if you're a South African moving there, or you're coming from Ukraine, or you're coming from I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East or something, where perhaps you don't get the same hourly wages. But Australia and Sweden are quite comparable. So that's a very long and convoluted way of not answering the question about what motivated me. I guess it's just been a lifelong drive that I've had ever since I was ever since I was a child. It was sort of like, well, I believe that I was created by God for a great purpose. I'm not exactly sure what that purpose is, but I've wanted to realize that purpose and realize that potential, and do things to maximize who I am and what I could become.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I agree. I think potential and growth is sort of this convoluted, mystical area of, and then how do you even define that? I mean, I've got my own definitions of potential, which I believe is to lead your life in a way that produces healthy cultures within yourself and those around you. So my journey is always to try and lead my life in a way that produces healthy cultures. Now, I don't nail that, right? I'll go and have 10 skillies with the boys on a Thursday night, and that's not really producing a healthy culture, man. I'm working on that, but I'm continually driving to be better in that regard so that I can produce an environment that is healthy for me, my wife, our kids, my dog, our friends and family, and the wider network. So what was it about Sweden that was challenging, and what did you find helped you grow the most? So stepping out of your comfort zone, moving countries, it's one thing to move to rural Australia. I mean, Australia's a very big place. But then moving whole countries, you're right in saying that a lot of people would say, why would you move here? You're from Australia. It's the best country in the world. And we do live in the best country in the world. And I got that question too when I was like, why would you leave? Heck, Emily's, so my wife's grandma is from Serbia. She immigrated here after the war. They immigrated with a 1-year-old and a newborn baby who they had on the way. And she said to me, mate, Australia is the best place in the world. Why would you want to move to Sweden? Why would you want to move anywhere? So, yeah, what was that like?
Well, I think that there's a realization that I have, and this has definitely prompted me to travel. And I think this is what everyone describes as the travel bug, and that is expanding your frame of reference, expanding your horizons. I think this is sort of unfortunately true. I think we as human beings, we compare. That's how we approximate value. We compare. And so, we live in this Australian context. Our good versus bad, or our normal, is just whatever we've experienced. And when I first started traveling seriously, which was back in, 2010, I went to America. Very similar to Australia, but wildly different. And there's things that I had never even considered could be done differently, that were done differently. And that sort of gave me a benchmark to compare things with, to know what's different. And then when I've traveled to third world countries, there's like a whole nother level of poverty, of different ways of living, and that helps you see what you have. And so there's been this drive that I've had to explore, to gain knowledge, to contextualize who I am, who others are, and the experiences that life brings me. So I think for me, it's been very important to study history, to learn about different cultures, to make them as diverse as you possibly can. I mean, one day I want to go to North Korea, for example, and people go, why would you want to go to North Korea? That's really dangerous. And there's ways to do it that aren't dangerous. I mean, they sort of have state-sponsored visits where you're not really seeing real North Korea, because it's almost stage acting in front of you. They want to present, their ideals of their socialist communist government towards you, but I'm doing that to learn. So for me, it's all about learning. It's all about context, um, and uh, and that drive within me has 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 caused me to take opportunities and also to take risks, because I think the biggest trap for a lot of people today, and this is true of especially young people, is it's so easy to live a life of meaninglessness or just entertainment. Like if you want to get in Australia, at least, you can maybe live on the dole. You can watch Netflix, almost unlimited entertainment. You can download whatever video game you want, or don't buy a PS4, maybe buy a PS3, play all the games there, and then when the PS5 comes out, move up to the PS4. You can live a life of entertainment, but you're not going to make an impact on the world. A couple of things I've said have maybe made this sound to be all about me, but it's not all about me. It's about the impact that I can have on the world in a positive and meaningful way, which is like maximizing my potential so I can assist and help others through education in particular, in the best way possible.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope that people would definitely see that. I mean, the whole premise of this podcast is to help people realise that they're created for a bigger cause. I think everyone has great potential that they can walk out, and for some people it looks like being a principal. For others, it looks like being a CEO of a massive multinational conglomerate, and for others, it's as simple as being a very good chippy.
Yeah, or being a very good
just
father, or being a very good yeah, exactly. And I think
yeah,
we have to be careful that we don't make value judgments according to our own skills and abilities, or according to, the expectations that maybe come to us through our flawed biology, or our media, or something like that. That we might see certain people or certain positions or certain personalities as inherently more valuable. It's a mistake. It's a trap that I think someone who's potentially very interested in self growth and has a lot of skills, maybe they're unrefined at the moment, but they could be refined, to not value themselves more highly than they ought to, and to see the the importance of different perspectives.
yeah, man, I agree 100%. I think what I've found in life is that, especially in the organisations that I've worked in, I've worked for pretty much all the major electrical companies in Queensland in terms of distribution and transmission now. And I've noticed that a lot of people tend to seek leadership positions or managerial positions from a perspective of, I get higher pay and I get a title that demands respect. And I think that's absolutely rubbish. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're the manager, the CEO, or first year apprentice. As far as I'm concerned, you're equal in that organisation, and everything you do adds value to the organisation. So it can be a big trap to fall into that, hey, I'm going to become a leader because I get paid more. It's like, man, you also got a hell of a lot more responsibility. You got to do the mundane, boring jobs. It's not as easy as I'm going to come in and tell everyone what to do and they're going to respect me. No. I mean, even you can talk about this now. You've stepped out of a teaching role. You had a leadership position in Sweden, and now you've stepped into, you've jumped quite a few rungs. I mean, when you think about
senior management.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, and we were talking the other week about it, and you said, man, there's these aspects of the job that I didn't think I'd have to do, like payroll. Talk about that. So, yeah, man, like how have you found that leadership journey so far? So, comparing to starting your teaching career as a graduate, moving overseas, teaching abroad, whether it be in London, the US, Sweden, what were some of the challenges you faced in that, and how have they helped you in your current role now? And is your role now what you thought it was going to be? I mean, you're only into it for 2 minutes.
I've only been in this role for, effectively 3 or 4 weeks, but I have been in middle management roles. And I think the same thing is true of someone who hasn't traveled a lot. You to someone who's only ever existed in lower levels of whatever their particular career is, and that's okay. But there is this, like, you don't know what it's like to be a leader until you are a leader, and you don't know what it's like to be an American or to be a Cambodian until you've sort of lived there and you've experienced that. And it's all about the frame of reference. I think a lot of people are very quick to recognize the flaws in their leadership, in their leaders, but a good leader is often a leader who you don't even realize what they're doing to be a good leader, and they're caring for people, and there's like a weight, there's a mantle, there's a responsibility that comes with leadership if you're going to do it for the right reasons, if it's not for selfish purposes, if you're really there to help and support, and if you really have good skills. I mean I'm just working flat out, and I don't have to do all these things. There's some things that I wouldn't have to do, but if I'm going to be a good leader, I have to do them. For example, I had a very tricky meeting yesterday, and it went for about an hour, and there was a lot of emotions involved. And there was some people who were really upset at the end of that meeting, not because of something I said, just because of what had happened. And so I gave 2 staff members a call after that, and it was 6:30 on a Friday night. I'm hoping to spend some time with my wife. I'm hoping to, I don't know, maybe relax. I'd love to be watching Netflix on TV or something like that. But there I am having a conversation with a staff member, having another conversation with a different staff member, calling up a parent who was really angry today about something that happened with their son, arranging to meet with them, talking to people, mentoring people, providing comfort for people, providing inspiration for people, and it's really fun. I've actually really enjoyed it, at least in these few weeks, and I think I'm doing a good job. But there's a weight, and I think younger in my career, I would have looked at leaders and been like, "Oh, you don't know what it's like to be me, to be a teacher. You're up there. You're you've got it easy. I'm the one who's doing the really hard work." And that can be true for some leaders, but I think I was ignorant before, and I think definitely. I don't think it's a little lonely, to be honest, because I don't think many people know, except for my wife, exactly what I'm doing every day, and it's a lot harder than what I was doing before.
Yeah, yeah. And that can definitely be a misconception on the employee's behalf. You look at your manager or your leader. So I like to define them in an organisation. Employees, well, it doesn't matter which way, horizontal, vertical. You have employees, you have managers, and you have leaders. Leaders instill the vision, managers carry out the vision, and then employees actually carry out the whole business. And it can be very easy for employees to look up to their managers and leaders and go, "Oh, you might aren't even doing anything hard. We're doing all the work." And that can be a very judgmental thing until you step into that role, which is probably what you're sort of finding right now. It's like, "Whoa, hang on a minute." And then you think back to all those moments, yeah, and you go, "Oh, how?" I was definitely had a
How
misconception
naive
on
was
that.
I? Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting because that in and of itself is growth, right? And you wouldn't have realized that until you stepped into this next phase of growth. So let's say I'm a 21-year-old, 22-year-old. I've recently graduated teaching. I'm looking to do my rural placement in Queensland. They really encourage that, but just in my honest opinion, I don't think they really support it too well. That's why they don't really get teachers going out there. But if I'm a 22-year-old, I've just finished my teaching degree, what would you be saying to me right now?
I would be I would be saying some. This is maybe some industry specific things, but first year teaching, I would start with some empathy. Like, it's really, really difficult, and don't feel you have to be everything all at once. I think a lot of first year teachers, they know what the standard could be. They know this is what I should be doing, and this is what I could be doing, but the capacity to do that is probably 27 hours a day, and you've got to sleep for at least 8 hours a day. So you're not going to be able to perform to that peak capacity. And I would say, like, it's okay to be in a stage of growth. I know a lot of first year teachers, they burn out. And they burn out because they have this sort of perfectionist idea of, I want to accommodate for every student in the classroom. There's a term we call differentiation. I want to differentiate for every single student in the classroom. I want to, run all these extracurricular activities, get to have positive relationships with the students, follow up on every single little discipline thing so I can have a really perfect classroom. I remember my first year teaching, I came home one afternoon, it was 4 o'clock, and I just went to sleep because I was absolutely exhausted. I needed to do lesson planning. I needed to do all these extra things. And I would say to this first year teacher, the first 3 years is just a process of survival. And once you get that sorted, then you can focus on, once you've got those routines, once you can build and you can grow. So I would just say to them, be mindful of the growth process. Like, you are in a growth process. I think it takes at least 5 years for someone to become competent and comfortable, and then maybe eight or 9 years until it's just until teaching becomes easy. And I think that's why the demands in this particular profession of education, we see a high teacher turnover. Anyone listening to this podcast, I'm sure they know teachers, and I'm sure they know teachers who speak about how stressful the job is. And I bet they also know some teachers who did a degree, maybe worked for a couple of years, and then aren't working as teachers anymore. Maybe they probably know more of those kinds of individuals. And I think that's just because of the expectations of the job. It's a job that's really important. In fact, I see it as perhaps the most important job of all. Educating our future. This is the cutting edge of humanity's future. This is young people. Maybe parenting is more important than teaching, but teaching would be a close second. Educating people, transferring the knowledge of thousands and thousands of years of human development. I sometimes ask my students, how long have you been learning for? And some of the students who are smart, maybe a common answer would be, oh, well, it's been 10 years. I'm in year 10 now, so I've been learning for 10 years. And maybe some of the really smart students, they go, well, I'm in year 10, but I'm 15 years old. So I've been learning for 15 years, ever since I was a baby. But I think the right answer is actually a lot longer than that. I think the right answer is 1,000 years, because that's what the role of a teacher is. It's sort of like condensing thousands of years of human intellect and knowledge, at least as a science teacher, and processes as ways of doing things. This is culture. This is what separates us from cavemen. It's education. And so it's such an important role with such a responsibility, and therefore with a lot of burnout too. So my advice to a first year teacher would just be to recognize you're not going to be perfect, but you can be perfect. It's a process.
Yeah. You mentioned that sort of 8 to 10 year mark is where you can start to coast, if you like. What advice do you have for that person who may be coasting and could potentially be backsliding, so to speak, for lack of a better word, and keeping in mind that teaching our future generations is super important. And I agree with you that it is one of the utmost pressing needs of our society. So how about that person? How do you renew your zealousness or your joy in teaching when you've done it for 8 years and it's, you've got it down to a fine art where you rock up at 8:30, you have 2 smokos, and then boom, you're done by 3 o'clock, that sort of teaching.
It depends. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, it depends on your goals. Career doesn't have to be everything. You might want to invest in your family, and maybe you've done the hard yards with teaching, and then where you're challenging yourself is with your family. Maybe where you're challenging yourself is with some side projects or in your marriage. I'm not sure what that looks like for an individual. But make sure you're challenging yourself somewhere. I would say no matter where you are in life, you always want to be on the cutting edge of something, because the moment that you slip into, and this is the trap that we talked about before, this comfort, this convenience, this entertainment, it'll be fun for a couple of weeks, and then it's going to be depressing, and then your life's not going to have meaning. And I think that's what a lot of people learned during the pandemic. We were so flat out in 2019. So finally, we get like a month or wherever you were in the world, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, to just sit at home and do nothing. This is amazing. Mental health, absolutely through the roof. Because I
Yeah.
don't think human beings are born to be in this position of just consuming. They're born to be. You've got to have this balance between comfort and chaos. Perhaps the two C words there, comfort and chaos. And you've got to bring a little bit more chaos into your life. And how do you do that? I would say by exploring something that's unknown, by doing something different, maybe by taking on more responsibility, by doing something that demands more of yourself. So that's where we led up to myself when my wife and I wanted to move to Sweden. It was probably about the 8-year mark of me teaching,
Yeah.
and I was at the same school. So I was looking for a challenge, and it didn't have to necessarily be in my career, but I think the way I'm wired, and I would even say the way that and I'm a Christian, and I would say the way that God has created me to be would be to expand my potential when it comes to education. And so that's exactly why I did that. And the fruit has been incredible. I mean, I went from a private school, very, very well behaved students, to probably the complete opposite end of the spectrum in Sweden. And I learned a completely different skill set. I was able to, step into leadership. And now I'm back in Australia with these skills, with a leadership position that if I hadn't gone to Sweden, there was no chance I would have been able to be in this position now. And I'm going to continue that. I'm at a growth phase now. I'm at a chaos time now. I'm at a weight of responsibility time now. But there'll be a time when I figured this out, and where I have moved further along the path of potential, and then there'll be another challenge. Maybe it'll be in career, maybe it'll be in family. I'm not sure, but I always want to keep pushing, keep pressing.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to talk about there, but before I move on to that, I sort of forgot where I was going with that, to be honest. So that's good. Um, yeah, look, I'll just go on that train of thought that I had, which was talking about comfortability and complacency. I like to believe that if you allow, like, I'm not saying comfortability is bad, but I do believe that comfortability can lead to complacency. And once you get in that zone of complacency, I've found in my own life that mental health goes out the window, and your drive, your zealousness for life goes out the window. You really want to sit around, mope around, do nothing. It's just easier to do nothing. It's easier to sit back in a spot of judgment and saying, oh, it's everyone else's fault that I'm like this, rather than taking the
That
responsibility.
victim,
So
yeah,
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 woe is me mentality, and I can agree, man. I was in this spot last year when we were on our way to a wedding, and Emily said to me, "Hey, we could go to Sweden with Dan and Alex." And at that point in my life, them little Navy ships have those radars that go around, ding, ding, like that, right? My brain was looking, scanning for this opportunity. And as soon as she said it, it was like, boom, that's what we need to do. We need to move, because I need to get out of this. I need to snap out of this mindset that I'm in, because comfortability had led to complacency. I left a job that I loved. I went into a new role in a different industry in Brisbane, and that job didn't work out really, quick, smart. And I was sort of left on my bum going, what's going on? And it led to this lifestyle of just, let's have a couple of beers, that'll lose the pain a bit. And then the next minute I'll just sit on the couch. My fitness regime went out the window. My health markers started dropping. I started getting pretty unhealthy. And then all of a sudden Emily's saying, yeah, let's go to Sweden. I went, whoa, man, that's awesome. I need to do that.
that's just,
And,
yeah.
once I got there, and it's literally what happened. We moved, and you and Alex were pivotal in us moving. It wouldn't have happened without you guys. But it's what I needed to get out of the funk that I was in. And it worked really well for me. And, circumstances happened that led us to come back to Australia a lot sooner than we first thought. But, that's life. It throws curveballs at you. So, yeah, man, I agree 100%. I think comfortability leads to complacency, and we have to be continually aware of that. And I find it funny you say 8 years. I've got a good friend who owns a coffee roastery in Brisbane here, and he was talking to me last year saying, mate, I reckon, you tend to have 4 or 5 careers in your life. They all last about 8 years in length. So stick at something for around 8 years, give or take, and then you'll probably find you'll move into the next thing. So I find that really interesting that
It's
you
probably the
taught by that.
10,000 hour rule. I wonder how long it takes. So if, let's say you work 40 hours a week, for let's say 48 weeks a year, multiplied by 8. Okay, that's about 15,000 hours of full-time work. So there you go. So maybe, yeah, have you heard of the 10,000 hour rule before? It takes 10,000 hours to master something.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, so I
Yeah, that's
guess,
interesting.
yeah. So I guess that would be, well, 6 years is enough to get 10,000 hours, and then maybe those last 2 years are the years where you just really consolidate everything. Or did I do my
Yeah,
maths right
smash.
there? Perhaps not, but close to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, talk to me about property investing. I know that you're an avid property investor. You now own properties in 2 countries. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So how does that happen? How do you become? How are you a teacher and then accumulate properties the way you did? I mean, and why are you passionate about that? What is it about property investing that gives you a good kick?
Yeah. So I have a multi-million-dollar portfolio. I own 8 to 10 investment properties. It depends on how you define an investment property. Some of them are dual key places. One of them is currently being built in Sweden, and actually, um, uh, I just sold one of the properties in Sweden as well. So, but then I've just bought here in Chinchilla the house that we're in. Um, I I would just preface all of this by saying, you mentioned before I'm very interested in personality, and I think the the positive side of my personality type is really just maximizing efficiency and maximizing value out of everything that I encounter in life. So whether or not I'm planning a holiday, or I'm trying to be involved in a career, which is really big picture things, or even I'm trying to plan my route home on the way from work, I'm going to try and make it as optimal. I'm going to try and make it as efficient, and I'm going to try and maximize the value as much as I can. That's my strengths, and that comes at the expense of certain weaknesses, which other people have as well. So when you're talking about step into potential podcast, I think if people are wanting that that drive and that attitude, I am perhaps someone who, through personality, someone could emulate, because that's just how I'm wired. However, I'm not saying that with an arrogant statement, because it comes with other downsides, which we maybe can talk about later. So I feel the reason I say that is because, as an Australian, I feel sort of maybe awkward just being like, oh look, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm advancing my career, and oh by the way, I also have 10 investment properties worth multi-million dollars. It's like, um, yes, they're all good things, but it's like it's not all good. It's not like
Yeah. Yeah.
these things come at a cost. So with that caveat, with that preface, what got me involved there? Um, well, it all started because I mean, I would say there's been times in my life where I've wanted to pretend that I've done it all through my own example, but I do. My parents have an investment property. Now they have one investment property, but I had an awesome example of my parents very um, being very wise with the financial resources that they've had. Now they're probably on the level of risk. Um, their risk appetite, it's sometimes called, is a lot lower than what mine is. Um, so they've left it at one. But I never was given I was never given pocket money as a child. I I um, I was given money which I actually had to request my pocket money by doing a budget. My parents would be like, my mum was an accountant, and she'd be like, so what do you need every month? Instead of us buying you clothes and us buying all this stuff for you, we'll give you that money. You can spend it yourself, but you have to budget. So I had to actually like manage money really well from a young age. And that was definitely the example of my parents. So I was very, very fortunate to have that. Then, okay, I'm probably going a bit too much detail, but none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the example of my parents. And so I'm really, really thankful for that. So I guess, let's say you do have great parents, or like who've been financially wise, awesome. Let's say you haven't, I would say find someone in your life who um, who is really wise with money, and connect with them. Ask them questions, get to know their mindset, because that you're going to need that example of someone who's gone before you first. And for me, I guess in aspects, it was my parents. But to take it to the level that I had, I listened to probably about 60 hours of a property investment podcast. And this is back in probably 2012. So I worked on the Gold Coast. I had an hour's drive each day. And the drive back, although I wanted to listen to music, or although I wanted to switch off, although I was tired, I would always listen to either a history podcast or a business podcast, or in this case, a property podcast. And so I tapped into this property podcast, and because of the example of my parents, I had about 12,000 Australian dollars in savings, which is probably about $15,000 or $16,000 now. Not a lot. But I was able to put that to a cheap investment property. And the property investment podcast sort of showed me that this was possible even with that small amount of money. And then it was just a matter of gaining experience. Then I used the equity in that transaction. A year later, the property value had grown because through this property podcast, I'd learned how to find a good deal and identify an area which was going to experience capital growth. And then I bought another, and then I bought another, and then I bought another. Times that by 10, and then here's where I am today. And what's motivating me to do all this? Well, it's financial security. So no matter what I'm going to do later on in life, I'll have that financial security to support me in that. And to be honest, teachers, they aren't known for making a lot of money. And I have a science sort of skill set that if I pursued different study options, perhaps I could be an engineer earning 3 times as much as I am right now, or plus. But being able to use the resources I have as a teacher, and to have that nest egg and to grow that nest egg has meant that I've been able to stay in the profession, and that these other opportunities, these sort of shiny, enticing promises of, study for 2 years, then I could become this and I could earn 3 times as much. Well, they haven't been as meaningful because I've got that solid nest egg, that solid foundation. So there's been some real benefits of having this property investment portfolio.
Yeah, I think that's like you sold this Australian dream, I think, of owning all these stupid amounts of investment properties and things like that, and how what can afford. But what do you think sets you apart in terms of how come you're successful in property investment, but there's a lot of boomers out there struggling right now? Let's say boomers who bought in, probably shouldn't call them boomers, but anyway, that's all right. Older generation people who bought in various locations around Australia outside of the metropole. What sets you apart from someone who, say, invested in Mackay or in rural Victoria, or in the middle of nowhere in Halls Creek, Western Australia? What's the difference? How come they are not as sort of successful? What happened? Where did they go wrong, or what?
There's a lot of aspects. A lot of people talk about luck, and you're very lucky. Anyone who is successful will be very quick to say it's not a lot of luck, it's a lot of hard work. But I could also say, there's an area where I've been blessed. As I said, I was blessed, and I'll use that word, it's often used in a Christian context. I've been blessed by God with examples of parents have gone before. I've been blessed with certain opportunities maybe that wouldn't have come my way. So I can't take the full credit for it, but that's not necessarily helpful and useful. On a practical sense, there's different personality types, and some people are more agreeable and some people are more disagreeable. And I'm certainly more disagreeable. If I set a goal, I'm going to make it happen. And I'm going to push through the bureaucratic barriers that get in my way. Buying my first investment property was easy. Almost anyone can buy one investment property if it's like cheap. This investment property was like $200,000. Like, it wasn't very expensive. And I hadn't even bought a property before. Banks are very, very willing to lend to one person. But when you get to 2 or 3 or 4, suddenly, from a bank's perspective, if you're trying to access finance, you become a greater risk. And so, I remember the second investment property, I walked into the bank and they were like, no, there's no way you can buy this. And they said to me, no bank will ever lend you this money. Okay. I go to another bank and I hear exactly the same thing. I go to another bank. Now I start looking for these alternate. I finally found, and this is actually where it comes back down to relationship. I wouldn't take no for an answer. And I knew, because I'd done the numbers, I knew that I could afford this property. And I knew that this was a good investment. And I knew that I was a tricky case. You see, why, like, let's say you're a busy bank lender and you've got 10 people come to you in a week and you've got space for 4 people to maybe do a deal with. Well, they're going to take the easy person. They're going to take the person who's got a very high income, who doesn't have a lot of debt. Um, that's like cash in hand for these people. So, and who are you? You're just like this 21-year-old kid wanting to like get into massive debt, get it or buy another property. So the way I built it initially was through relationship. I'd walk into the bank and I'd dress well. I'd look the part. I mean, we're human beings. Sometimes these external things are more important than we wish they had to be. I developed a relationship with the bank manager, and he believed in me. He believed in my vision. He believed in my goal, and so he would help me. He'd be like, what if we did it like this? Or if I put it through the system like this? And so he would know intricately the systems, and he would be able to work those systems in order to get the deal. And right now, I've got relationship with a very, very good mortgage broker. So even though I've got like 10 properties, I probably have like 17, 18 different loans. So they're all sort of split and money is going here and there. We can pull money out and equity draws and all these things. And so he's very, very creative and knowledgeable, and he believes in me. Like, he knows what my goals are. And you can't do it all yourself. And so I would say, like, it starts off with persistence, but there's also an element of relationship there. Like, you've got to well, if someone's going to work hard for you, it's like, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So therefore it's not easy. So how can you develop relationships with people and knowledge? And I'm probably saying the same point 3 times now, but does that make sense?
Yeah. So rather than because I guess all the entrepreneurs out there would be saying, "Oh, yeah, you just got to hustle," but it's more about relationship building.
Well, that's part of the hustle.
Well, yeah, but you can hustle smart and you can hustle dumb, right? If you're going to make good relationships, it's probably a much more consistent approach. It's going to work out better if you build good relationships. So I think this ties back to the whole personality thing and growing up as a Christian and seeking to do good for others and the way you live your life. I suppose it would be a lot harder if you're this person who is self-seeking, narcissistic personality trait, those sort of things that are going to, what's in it for me and nothing in it for you kind of mentality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember I gave my I gave my bank manager like a box of M&Ms one day. It's like silly, but it was just like, thank you for helping me, And some would say that's bribery or something. I don't know. Maybe in the industry it's considered that, but it wasn't about that. It was just, thank you for working hard for me, and I appreciate you. And it's appreciating people. But I mean, pride, arrogance, these are things I definitely struggled with. Maybe I would say I don't struggle with them as much as I did before. I think that's definitely true. Although, is that a proud thing to say? I'm not sure. But I definitely had this. I definitely had a chip on my shoulder in earlier years, which I had to work on, and which definitely set me back in my career. And I think that's a real trap for people who are like-minded, like me, who have that drive and who can achieve success and who are, self-confident, very sort of, they express themselves well. To appear arrogant is, I mean, the Bible says God gives grace to the humble, but
resist the prideful.
Resist the prideful, and that's like, I don't think that's a spiritual thing. Like, it's just like it's like a law of nature thing, where it's like, if you're arrogant, you're not going to value people. They're not going to help you, and you're not actually going to be able to even access that help in others, because you're going to think you've got it all figured out. Well, you don't have it all figured out. There's someone out there who would be able to give you that piece of advice. And so you have to be humble and you have to involve other people. And, you know, property investing is seen as a pretty, like, there's certain ways of characterizing a property investor as someone who's like taking money from this rich person who's taking money from the poor people in society. I just want to speak to that because there's definitely a way that you can do that. So you can be a property investor who's in it for the wrong reasons. But I really care for the tenants that I have. And my tenants want to be in these properties, for example. So one of my tenants is a hoarder. Like, he doesn't work. He gets money from the government and he just hoards all this stuff. And a lot of property people would say, no, I don't want this guy in my house, kick him out. But I've kept him on there. I've actually charged him a little bit more. Well, actually now it's probably under market rate because the rents have gone up so much. But $5 a week extra to repair the carpets after he moves out or something like that. But I've worked with this person. You know, another person, he works at the local bakery, you know, and his rent's probably $50 a week under what it should be. I remember when COVID hit, I offered all of my tenants instantly. I said, look, I'm going to offer you a 10% discount on your rent because I know times are tough. And if you need more, let me know. And just let me know if you don't want that, because the default is that you will get that. And a couple said I don't need that, and a couple of them did take that, and they were really appreciative of that. And also, I don't try to buy existing properties. I think I try to build where possible, building a new house for someone to live in. Like, that's the problem comes from investing when you're buying only existing properties and you're, you know, charging extortionate rates. If you're building, you're supplying something. And so that's like, I've got a friend actually who lives in, him and his wife, they've just had a baby. And I built this amazing house for them, as in it's perfect for them. Like, it was almost built with them in mind. And I gave them some of the ownership of the design prices, and they're just the type of people who don't want to buy a house. They want to. He said to me, like, I'd rather invest my money in other things. I don't want to buy a house. I'd rather have that flexibility of moving around. And so, yeah, he's getting a lot cheaper rent. If he wants something done in the garden, I'll do that for him. I'm effectively breaking even on most of my investment properties. Other ones I've built, and I've had to battle the sort of all these bureaucratic aspects to get the deal across the line. And, you know, one of my properties is currently flooded. And that tenant, he's moved on to another place. We've helped him set up there, but I'm footing the bill for that. And that's like, if you're a tenant, you don't have to deal with that. I mean, I'm doing it with the attitude to help people, at least that's my intention. And so, I think it's naive to broad brush and characterize all property investors as these evil people. If no one was buying houses or building houses, no one would have a place to live. I mean, that's sort of that's how the world works.
Yeah. But it's all not peaches and cream, you know. You think, oh yeah, we'll just get a heap of investment properties, retire early, but it's not really that simple, is it? It's a lot more complex thing.
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of hard work. Yeah, and I've taken on a lot of risk as well. Like, it's a lot of work. Anyway, but yeah,
definitely. I want to talk about you know, you alluded to the negative aspects of your personality trait. So you're an ENTJ. What is that?
Yeah.
You know, and you host your own podcast, well, YouTube channel, I should say, on the ENTJ personality type.
Yeah, I don't have time to do any videos on it at the moment, which is really sad. But I've had maybe 80,000 plus views on that. I've got 2,000 subscribers. It's I've only done like 15 videos, but they have tended to reach. They've reached a niche at least. So, in the simple way of talking about it, I'm an extrovert. You can probably tell by the way I have conducted myself in this interview. For those who don't know. The N stands for intuitive, which means sort of a big picture thinker. That's a simplified way of thinking about it. And the T means thinking, and the J means judging, which, well, judging is probably the wrong way to do it, because the wrong way to think about it, because the opposite of judging is perceiving. So judging is more like maybe making decisions. So I'm more prone to sort of acting, judging, than
Yeah.
taking things in. So some people like yourself, you're probably more of a P personality. You're very good at perceiving and taking things in, and then you'll do like you'll probably perceive first, act second. Or for me, I'm probably act
Yeah.
first, perceive second. Which
Yeah.
now you're starting to see some of the downsides of the personality. The other way of being a thinking personality type, you I'm not particularly warm. That's something I've had to grow in. There's been times, especially earlier on in my 20s, where I've told you how I'm more disagreeable and how I'm more goal orientated, where in order to achieve a goal, um, bulldozed over people who aren't as um, strong personalities as I am. So I've put a lot of people off personally, and so that's been problematic, but I've had to work on those aspects of myself. I'm a big picture person, but I'm not a small details person. That's been another problem within my career. Is sometimes I've just wanted to overlook the small details. These things don't even matter. Why do I have to document this or file this or structure this in this set specific way? Why can't I just do it this way? Because this way is going to be a quicker way. And if it's a quicker way, then I'm going to be able to do twice as much in one day. But so I've definitely sort of steamrolled people, ignored the smaller aspects, ignored the smaller details. Maybe it's harder for me to develop deep relationships with people compared to some more of the feeling personality types. Maybe my poor wife has to put up with a very strong-willed husband, and she's very strong-willed herself at times as well. So that's a good grace that God's given her, but because she needs it with me, But I'm not always easy to get along with, So that's the other side of the personality type. People don't necessarily come for me for when they're upset, when they're hurt. They'll go to someone who's more caring. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think it means to step into potential, and how? I mean, that's a very, very individual question. I mean, there's an infinity amount of ways you can define that, but how do you step into
Yeah.
potential? And then also, how does an ENTJ specifically step into potential?
Yeah. Well, I would answer that question. I mean, the work of Carl Jung, which is where all this personality stuff comes from, he talks about integrating the different aspects of your personality, and um, I think for me personally, I mean, you can always make it a little formulaic where it's like, well, for me, I don't really need to learn how to um, have more drive in my life, or I probably need to learn how to relax more. Um, so how do I step in potential? It's sort of like focusing on your weaker areas. And maybe that's by listening to people who are strong in the areas that I'm weak. And so for someone listening to this podcast, um, I would hope that there'd be some people who maybe have had issues with people like me in their lives, who've been hurt by people like me in their lives. Listen to me in this podcast and understand me, because I want to do things for the right reasons, and I believe that I do. But there's just been times in my life where I haven't valued people, where I've acted in arrogance, and I think if someone who is weaker in an area where I'm strong in, they can learn from that. They can understand that, and they can integrate that part of themselves rather than suppress it and remain in that victim mentality, or just hold on to hurt that someone like myself might have caused them in their life. Try to understand them and maybe even become, in a weird way, more like them. Not in a way that diminishes who they are and what their skills are, but this is where this Jungian idea of integration comes in. But to integrate the different sides of yourself and your personality, I would say is, well, at least it's been helpful for me when I've done it. I've done it for my weaker aspects.
So it obviously takes a lot of introspection and thinking about, and that's probably the thinking sort of aspect of it.
Yeah, well, maybe that's
Self-reflection.
maybe the path is like specific for my personality, because it's a very introspective, big picture, thinking about things way of doing it. So, yeah, try to filter that through the language of your own personality, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have to, everyone, it doesn't matter what personality trait you are, I think you have to be extremely self-critical, but also being gracious with yourself at times. But thinking about how did I act towards that person, and what was it perhaps their perception of what I did there? You know, I'm always critiquing myself on how did I deliver this conversation? Did it make Dan feel warm? Did it make him feel welcoming? Did I draw out of Dan, gold? Because I believe you can learn off everyone, and that's sort of my goal in this podcast, is that we can interview so many different people to understand their walk of life, to learn from them. So hopefully one day I'll get dudes like Ed Milet on here, some real big famous flash blokes, and women. It's not just gender specific. But I'm also, hopefully I can have a chat with a homeless dude, because there's something you can learn off everyone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we always have to look inwards before looking outwards, and having that intrinsic worldview, what can I do better, rather than an extrinsic worldview, which is saying, it's everything is everyone else's fault, it's not mine. Taking self-responsibility, Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, clean up your room, man. Take responsibility for your life. Go forward and actually have an impact. Find responsibility, do something. And I think this is key in everything, especially in personal growth. Yeah. So I guess, what do you think? What do you think, if you were to sum it up in a real sentence? What is it to step into potential?
I don't want to sum it up just yet. I want to go off this thought, because I couldn't do what you're doing. For example, your skill set is being able to listen and to draw that out of people, which is, Joe Rogan, famous podcaster, who are some other famous podcasters, they have that same ability. That's why they're so successful in that field. But I think if we were to bring this conversation back to something we talked about right at the start, it's about stepping out of the comfort zone. It's about experiencing something new. And I think that's what you're talking about with this podcast. And the same reason that I've gone and traveled around the world and learned about history was to broaden my horizons and broaden my perceptions of everything. That's what this podcast is about. That's why you bring in the homeless person. That's why you bring in the famous personalities like you've mentioned. It's to broaden that perception, and particularly pay attention to the different personalities. That's the advice. Well, maybe, if I could sum it up, stepping into your potential is to continuously take on new challenges. I can make it better than that. Yeah. Well, just to take on take on the challenges. To take on more challenges. Yeah, let's go with that. To take on the challenges. Yeah. I reckon we can word this even better, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Look, I love that. I think that's a very good view on what it means to step into potential, because I'm a Christian as well, and we get taught, well, this is my experience anyway in Christianity, is that I've sort of got thinking, breakthrough, Lord, breakthrough. We need a miracle in this moment, and I'm like, dude, the miracle happened when Jesus died on the cross. That's the miracle. That's the breakthrough. Now we live in that perpetually. So anything that happens to me, it doesn't happen to me anymore. It happens for me. So, I feel like we've been taught as Christians to A, shy away from a challenge, or B, pray for the challenge to go away. When I believe it's fully, in my life, the experience has been, take it at all joy when you experience various trials, because we know that they're going to produce character, which is going to produce ultimately hope. Now, I butchered that scripture, but the point is that endure the challenges with joy. Romans 5.
Maybe it's not stepping into the potential per se, but it's like moving close? Like, how do you step towards your potential, right?
Yeah.
And that's by taking on challenges, by
Yep.
experiencing things that are different, maybe even by taking a risk. It's not going to get you there. It's like, it's a journey, not a, it's like there is a destination, an ideal destination, but it's more important is that step-by-step journey.
Yep, day by day, one more day at a time. You know, I just finished reading this book, One More, by Ed Milet, and he talks a lot about just one more day, or one more rep, or one more hello to someone, you know. And I think I'm really learning to put that aspect into my life where I can have a one more attitude to life. You know, at work, it's, yeah, one more beer, you know. One of my mates would call him one more, but, you know, that sort of one more probably isn't that good for you, but the one more approach to one more rep, to one more
One
good
more
work
challenge.
today. Yeah, one more challenge. Take it. It happens for you, not to you, know, because not all challenges are from Dan. Sometimes you're going to get a challenge. I mean, you've had challenges in your life. Well, you didn't choose that. You wouldn't choose a hard time. Why would you choose a hard time? No one really wants that, right? But I think it's definitely a higher level of growth associated with, hey, this is really challenging. And you know what? I'm going to take the bull by the horns and we're going to work through this. Why? Because it's happening for my development. It's going to give me a tool that I can use to bless someone in the future. You know, so I really like that. I think that's a great way to define it, to continually look for and move towards a challenge.